Good evening, faithful Lighthouse viewers. You are once again joining us for another great episode. To open our show, we have today's guest, poet Violeta Orozco, sharing with us her original poems, La Aparecida and The Midnight Air.
So happy to be here, Trisha. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm going to read this poem. It's dedicated to an aunt that appeared out of the blue after 15 years. She showed up to my father's house in Mexico City exactly at a point where when he had left the house for a few minutes and never came back. And it was exactly on Dia de Muertos Eve, on the Day of the Dead, the eve of the Day of the Dead. So that was a very meaningful event to me because she appeared as a soul that I had not seen in over a decade. So this is La Aparecida for mi tía Norma, La Aparecida. The neighbor told us she came to say goodbye. 25 years later, she knocked on the same door, imagining someone should be living there still. But no one answered. Not even a dog rushed out to meet her like before. She could have come 6 months ago and he was still alive and barking at every neighbor on the block. What was she thinking? Coming back like that into our lives when we'd already left for other cities. My brother perched high up on a steeple in Oaxaca, restoring a 300-year-old dome, his magic hands returning Baroque churches to their original aspect. While I gasped in awe at El Milagro, the miracle, mi tía estaba viva. My aunt was alive. She was last seen on November 1st, Dia de los Muertos Niños, claiming she had come back. La desaparecida, finalmente aparecida. The disappeared one finally reappeared. The strangest thing is my dad didn't see her. He left the house to get milk and eggs. Milk and eggs, for Christ's sake. At the exact moment she walked into her old haunt, she never came back, never left a phone number, an address, any sign or sound. She left it. She had come, no warning or farewell. I wonder what she had come to tell us, even as I write from another country, my ear pressed to the ground to catch the slightest beat of her footsteps upon my father's lawn.
So Violeta, I noticed in the in your poem, and the mention of the supernatural element, and the fact that the dad in the poem had went out to buy milk, at this inopportune moment when the spirit appeared. And it made me think of my upbringing in the Philippines, where pretty much after I got used to being there, it was very commonplace to think of spirits inhabiting the world around us, guiding us, through our days. It became almost normal. What do you think is the reasoning why that magic is so lost, and in a culture like being here in the United States, or in a westernized culture? Is it like a sort of cynicism, or like lack of the suspension of disbelief?
Yeah, I love your question, Trisha. I'm thinking about it, and I'm really inhabiting this world again, right? The kind of the ancestral world, because I think that our ties to the ancestral bond are invisible but very powerful, and that's something I didn't notice until I came to live in the US. I had been reticent to accept those forces in reality, because I kind of had a like scientific upbringing, and
Okay.
and my mom's a big atheist, so she would like really, my parents would be really upset at sort of like the superstition of my mother's my mother's family, sort of superstitious outlook on the world. But now that I am here, and as you say, that I realize that there's something missing, which is that kind of mystique, right? Yes. I realized it was not about the ghosts. It was about a connection to the forces that produced us. So it's not about, I'm not even sure it's about magic. I think it's also about the symbolic value of that deep connection we have to our elders. And I did not know, for example, when this aunt that I hadn't seen in a long time came back, I had not realized that she was also, in a way, my ancestor. And she kind of came back to say, hey, I'm alive. I'm here. Don't forget about me. I just, didn't talk to you for 15 years, which is slightly rare in Mexican culture, because people usually don't just disappear, because we have very strong familial bonds. But
that kind of harkens to, I think there might be this connection that needs to be explored more about why people do this thing where, when they're in the grieving process and they tell other people that I hear my mother say, for example, or my sister who passed away in the wind, or I see them, when I'm looking up at the clouds, because there's that necessary connection that comes from nature, that's also ancestral. I love that. Thank you so much. So, folks, if you haven't seen already, we have here sitting with us in our virtual studio, Violeta Orozco. Violeta is a bilingual writer, poet, and spoken word artist, writing in English and Spanish, based in Cincinnati. A literary translator from Mexico City, she translates Chicana and Latinx poets for Nueva York Poetry Review. A PhD scholar of Chicano and Latinx literature at Romance Languages and Literature Department at the University of Cincinnati, she seeks to restore the fractured links between the broken bones and the languages of the Americas. Her poetry has been published or is forthcoming from Acentos Review, Label Me Latina, Chicana and Latina Studies, MALCS Journal, Harvard College's Palabritas, Common Threads, and elsewhere. She's the author of 3 poetry collections. Her latest, The Broken Woman Diaries, published by Andante Books, which is scheduled to come out next month. Violeta, welcome officially to our virtual studio.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're so welcome. So I do understand that you have another gorgeous poem to share with us that is titled The Midnight Air. Would you please share that with us?
Of course. So this poem has an epigraph by June Jordan, which says, "The subterranean beginnings of all light." The midnight air. A poet with the name of a summer month believed in bodies that stirred up the oceans, a blind writing upon the finger's shore. Only now, in the intimate silence, can I finally say your name. I'm only a floating plant, heaving in the current. The rocks rub against each other, carving the sand into a dwindling cave. I don't have a single word of solace for the dying crowds that follow the trajectory of the wave. can we only remember our hands touching as the light dissolves into the air? The night is still. I know that you are close, like a thought I put away, saved for later. That day is also slipped behind, and I can mourn what has come back altered. A friendly gesture and a burning hand. I have weakened slightly, waiting for the tired tide. I too want to rest and remember and forget. We were once here, waiting and certain among the hollow leaves. A cockroach nestles somewhere in the room. We all live accompanied by our foreign ghosts. And why then, I wonder, do I see you as a tree I can rest my head upon? Spreading myself out like a flowing field unto a mindless sky.
My goodness, the way you read that, haunting. It completely embodies the atmosphere of the poem. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to quote a few lines from the poem. And in your poem, you have the lines, a poet with the name of a summer month. And then you go to, and why then, I wonder, do I see you as a tree I can rest my head upon? So there, in this poem, there are so many lines that they all almost seem to conjure up, like a type of incantation, a being that is longed for, but only exists on the edge, wrestle between desiring something stronger than recollection. But and then in the next moment, there is a desire for a respite or a death from this knowing. Will you please invite us a little bit more into the thought behind this poem?
I remember getting that question a couple of months ago.
Did you?
And I was very mysterious about it because I think most of my poems are always directed at somebody really specific. And in the end, the process I kind of go through is always erase the names because those people know they were for them. And those are the foreign ghosts and the permanent presences that I think accompany us all through life, that we are always in the shadow of a longing, but we can rarely get to materialize that longing. It's always beyond us, and that's why we created poetry, I think, because we cannot really enter into contact with these presences. They're always in the shape, they always have the shape of an absence, whether it be a person or a place we cannot reach.
You just the last three things that you said that embodies so much, that like it's always just beyond, and you're always grasping for it, longing for it. That is something that propels the poetry. It truly does. I love the way that you phrased that. Can I have a t-shirt? I want to make a t-shirt of that.
And I feel that we don't gain a lot if we name, the person that the poem was written for, because we can't see what's behind that presence, right? Which is really an absence, like a painful absence.
Right? Does the absence of naming it make it lose a little bit of its power, or does that kind of save you maybe somehow from the longing and the pain?
I think, yeah, I mean, of course, but I also think that naming doesn't bring whatever that person signified to life. It doesn't resolve anything.
It doesn't. Yeah. it truly is like trying to reanimate the dead, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I love the way that this conversation is going, but we need to pause for a break, folks. When we return, we will delve a little bit more into the wonderful poetry of Violeta Orozco. Welcome back from the break. We are speaking today with poet Violeta Orozco, author of the upcoming book, The Broken Women Diaries. Welcome back, Violeta.
Hi.
Hello. So I have to delve into another one of your poems, actually, that you did not share today, but I was reading and I was so mesmerized by it. And it is Medea. So I'm going to start again with a line that I found really just it was so much. So the line is, so many things would have changed if he. That is so maddening just to read that line. It's so maddening. And so you revisit the Greek tragedy and you inhabit this woman, you inhabit this character, or the narrator inhabits this character who could sadly, unfortunately, be any woman who is lamenting the skewed perception and being demonized for simply being female. Even up to this day, in this very day and age.
Oh,
yeah. So compound that with being a woman who is perhaps like us, a woman of color, or indigenous, or black. And then so there is, again, I'm going to say that line because it's infuriating just to hear it. And it just causes a response. So many things would have changed if he. And it makes me just it comes to the center that our lives still live on the whim of this very male centric, male awarded society. So how do we make our way with this sort of backlash? How do we lift up others, lift up our sisters, our contemporaries, and those we mentor to forge on when we're up against this?
Man, I'm still basking in the afterglow of your question. It's amazing. I read this poem, and in the book you will actually, it was published as Medea, but in the Círculo de Poetas magazine online, but in the book it's actually a Mexican Medea, because obviously the demonization of Mexicans in the US is also an important part of that narrative, and kind of pointing out that racialized and gendered rhetoric that gets compounded into these interlocking oppressions. So I think the first thing we have to do, or at least what I see as my duty, is to like undemonize that figure, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's such a scary character. It's kind of like, it's scarier than Medusa, because, you know, like Medusa has like serpents in her hair, but that's not that bad. Medea kills her children. Like, that's bad. Any misogynistic society would condemn a woman who kills her children without taking into account what it means to raise children in a misogynistic society. Is that even fair? So, you know, I have a very intimate relation with this myth, because in a way it is the myth of La Llorona in in Mexican culture and
Yes,
Chicana culture.
indeed.
And I realized this until I can't remember, but this connection wasn't obvious to me until at some point, I think I saw another poem that kind of had this reading, and it clicked in my head, and I was like, oh, so what demonizes these women is that they killed their children, but who were these women to have killed their children? That's the first question. Because what does it take for a mother to do that? So I think once I asked that to myself, I changed my optics on the whole myth and thought, oh, man, in a way, we have to go to delve inside ourselves to find that woman. Because if what is it in us that shies away or really repulses, right? This immoral murder, right?
Yeah.
If we really delve into that abyss, then what we encounter is not fear, but just understanding. Of course, like La Llorona, she killed her children because she saw that there was no future for them.
Yes.
Or for herself, and that any future under colonization would be worse than her children's death. And that was very realizing that was very powerful,
and that
because
right
it gives a different angle.
That story, see, that story is never told. It's always in sound bites and clips you hear, and you're always hearing it maybe from a certain perspective, and maybe that's sometimes male. But are you hearing the true story, or are you hearing what's happening behind all that? I've noticed stories come back recently to be re-examined in the media, and I think right away of Lorena Bobbitt. She was very demonized for what she had done, and it became a soundbite in media about her lopping off the genitalia of her husband. And that's all she was remembered for. They didn't bother to see what happened, behind the story, to see if she was a woman that may have been in an unsafe situation, if she was without resources. They maligned the fact that she was not a woman who was white, but she was a woman who was Latina. That was a strike against her. So that very much, these myths that are common to each culture, non-white culture, non-American culture, they seem to have the cautionary tale already built in there for a reason. It's almost like they were putting code in the stars to lead us and say, look at this, listen to this, hear and observe past what's going on, just goodness. I mean, Violeta, you're opening up more doors. And it's exciting to go through those doors with you. And I want to continue doing that and challenging it, Let's bring this to the forefront. I feel like you're the one interviewing me because I'm doing most of the talking. So I wanted to mention, because I said this a while ago when I was introducing you, and this was so juicy to me, how you mentioned you seek to restore the fractured links between the broken bones and languages of the Americas. What does this undertaking involve?
Well, it involves a lot of things. I don't know if I can explain it in a sentence, but
okay.
But I guess for one thing, it means that our identities are multiple always. It doesn't matter if we don't know that. We have to, I guess, as the inhabitants of and not just the Americas, really. yeah, any ancestral culture is not founded upon a single set of peoples with a single language. We're all historical creatures that have been through processes of diasporization and multiplication of our identities. So to think of ourselves as not single is very important. And I guess when I'm saying the broken bones of the Americas, I'm thinking colonization. That's kind of my metaphor for colonization. Because, you know, when you talk about like your Filipino culture and how we have this common bond over a certain worldview, I think, yeah, that's it. See, even though our historic paths at some point diverged, our meeting points are right there, right?
Yes.
So that's something that I find very important to restore, because I think we need more people doing this care work of piecing back together all our identities that have been destroyed by colonial processes and
That's true.
yeah.
Care work. I like that phrase. Yeah, because we do need more people to take upon that. That is, again, I know I keep on rephrasing, I keep on repeating, but it is powerful. A lot of the things that you said are calls to action, to to set these in motion, and how to do them, and how we're doing them by beginning with the words and going from there. So I wanted to talk about your upcoming book, The Broken Women Diaries. According to the description on the web page, the publisher's page, it invites the reader to begin the empowering process of making oneself whole through the work. So I'm excited to know more about your poetry, your new poetry collection. What was the initial inception point, and going from there?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking about the title of the book, Trisha, because the it actually has two sources, which is two main sources, which is we have this very important myth in Mexico of a goddess who tumbled down a hill. It's so there was this is an Aztec goddess which is called Coyolxauhqui, and she was thrown off the hill by one of her brothers because there was a war going on between the brother, the mother, and the sister. Well, the brothers were. And her body was dismembered, and there is a slab of stone recording that history in the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City that I used to visit often with my mother. And I would always be really impressed at the huge slab of stone with this carving of it's also volcanic rock. This carving of Coyolxauhqui, the goddess of the moon, completely dismembered and yet reassembled. So it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle, and that is the theme of the art cover in the book. It's Coyolxauhqui dismembered and remembered in the Aztec mythology. So I kind of, in a way, I say she's the original broken woman, even before Simone de Beauvoir came up with that with that term. And she has a very famous book, which is sometimes translated as The Broken Woman. And so this myth precedes that one, the Mexican myth. So I thought it was important to also piece together those feminist heritages, the pre-Columbian one and the pre-Hispanic one, and European one, and they're both my heritage. So, yeah, thanks for asking.
Thank you so much for that. That was I always love delving into the stories behind and the mythology. There is a beauty and elegance to be found in, you know, in knowing these, and it connects us more with ourselves. I think when that happens.
Yeah, thank you so much for the space to talk about my book, because it's really been a beautiful process, all the production process and the editing and just the teamwork with the editor, because it's initially like the manuscript was only like 60 pages, I think, but the editor was really interested in an essay that's about my generation, the millennials, which is called the Sleepless Generation, that will be published in Somos en Escrito anthology, which is really about, it's called the Sleepless Generation because it's hard to sleep in these conditions. Just global disempowering, brown people from the global south, etc. So I added, it's mostly a poetry collection. About 80 pages are poetry, but 10 are nonfiction. It's a personal essay about the Sleepless Generation. The other name I gave it was Generation Diaspora, because many of us live in the diaspora, and the diaspora is our home. You can't take that away from us in a way.
Yeah.
Like, it's part of our identity, and that was one of the, I feel like, the great magnets of that manuscript, because that's why it's called also The Broken Woman Diaries, because it's about after diaspora, how do we piece ourselves together, not only as a generation, because it's mostly about women of color and the experience of being a Mexican woman in the United States, and also about what the subjects that you were mentioning about how do we recalibrate our expectations, right, as women, to re-empower ourselves? How do we recalibrate our narratives to not be broken women? Because that's just the onset. Yeah, I'm broken, and now what do I do? What do I say? How do I restore my soul? How do I restore the soul of other people's? They're in the same position. We are an army of broken women. We have a lot of power. And in Mexico, there's right now a very important feminist movement that started around 2017. And there is nothing that will stop them, that will stop us. And the book was like born before that. I think I sent like the finalized manuscript around then, around 2017. And it's taken, no, wait, it was probably 2018, because it's been kind of a long production process because of the pandemic. It took like, it's been extended, but we also had an illustrator for it, very talented artist from Mexico City, Perla Barrera. So that was also part of the process of producing the book. Like kind of drawing from the Chicana tradition and the codices, like the art of the pre-Hispanic people in central Mexico, and their drawings and their drawing upon all that heritage to illustrate the book. So that's, again, all the lineages that go into producing a book that has a vision that is really, I think that's what every book wants to share. It's more than a set of poems. It wants to share a vision of reality.
Yeah. And it's the mention of you know, and it just coming to the forefront that you are of a generation that is born into a diasporic reality, that gives me hope that because this is all that your generation has known, that it's going to shape positively what's going to go forward. Hopefully, that's the hope, and it breaks, you know, that curse that happened to other generations who were not as exposed to this. So you know, it's a blessing really, but it's a blessing only if, you know, it can be more widely spread and believed by more people that this is what we're living in. It's not, here's these people, here are us, and it's separate. We're not. It truly is that melting pot that we want. As corny as that sounds, it has to be. It has
Yeah,
to be.
because
It's not going to function any other way. It shouldn't function any other way.
all the people that are living in dysphoric realities of some sort, or
Yeah.
so many. Yeah.
Well, Violeta, thank you so much for sharing this
Thank you.
wonderful time with us. I wanted to end with one last question. Take a deep breath and don't overthink this. Just go with the first thing that comes to your mind. Without thinking too hard on the answer, I want you to give me 3 words, only 3 words, to tell us who you are in the order of importance to you.
4 words. Poet. Translator of realities.
Ah, yes. Oh, it's been a pleasure to have you with us here in the virtual studio. Faithful Poets Lighthouse viewers, please follow Violeta. You can pre-order her book through www.andante.com. That's ANDANTE.com, where you can find out more about Violeta, her work, and like I said, to pre-order a copy of her book, The Broken Woman Diaries. You can also follow her on Instagram at Viletra, which is VLETRA. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube, the Poetry Global Network, and also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the PGN Official, and continue to show us support and love by watching our programming and liking and commenting on all our videos. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thanks so much to the Poets Lighthouse and the Poetry Global Network.
We appreciate you so much.
Me too.